BJ is back, baby. Man, I have not made a video since the Kayvon Thibodeau versus Aiden Hutchinson comparison video. If you guys want to see that, I will link to it up above because I finally got my voice back. Today is the first day I have had my voice back. I have lost my voice for the last 5 to 6 days. And it might not sound 100%, but it's back, and so is BJ back again today, baby. We're going to be talking about 4 realistic and viable wide receiver options for the Jaguars to take at number 33 if they choose to go wide receiver. And I like all of these guys a lot, and I'm going to be ranking them in ascending order, going from number 4 to number 1. Obviously, number 1 being the guy that I would ideally like there the most. But I got some good news to share with you guys today before we get into today's video. Man, I just got accepted into the University of Central Florida for the fall semester of 2022 for my journalism program, man. So I'm going to be taking the next steps in my journalism and broadcasting career. I'm super excited. That means I'll be moving out to Orlando in the next 4 to 5 months, and I'll be graduated from FSCJ Community College here in Jacksonville at the end of summer. Super grateful, super blessed. Had to share that information with you guys. Also, quick little PSA, you can call me UCF Jaguar. Well, don't actually call me that, but I just had to put that out there. Back to the point of the video, let's get into today's video. So the first wide receiver I'm going to be talking about is wide receiver out of the University of Alabama, John Metchie III, who is a 5'11", 187-pound wide receiver, and he had a terrific 2021 showcase with the Crimson Tide this past season. Obviously, Bryce Young, the Heisman winner at quarterback for the Crimson Tide, won Heisman, so he put up great numbers with John Metchie III. He did have an ACL tear in 2021, which ended up ruining his season, but I expect for him to make a full and healthy return to begin the 2022 NFL season wherever he lands. In 2021, John Metchie III had 96 receptions, 1,142 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Now let me talk about some pros and some cons that I really noticed when watching over him. So some positives I took away from watching John Metchie was he is a great separation defender, using his head fakes and arms to perfect his routes, really getting corners to get on their back feet and backpedal and really make them guess which way he's going, because he's very great at utilizing his body and his control, getting defenders to have to make a guess. Great separation off the line of scrimmage, is able to be patient in the middle of the field with his routes. Very, very good when it comes to improv. I noticed that a lot with John Metchie and Bryce Young, and that's something you want any receiver to have with their quarterback. Tyreek Hill is the perfect example of this. Whenever Patrick Mahomes needed to improvise and run around in the pocket, guess who was there? Tyreek Hill. Whenever Russell Wilson needed to improvise in the pocket, Tyler Lockett was always there. John Metchie did a phenomenal job of that with Bryce Young this past season. He's very good at locating the ball in the air. Not so much great physicality-wise. I saw a lot of times, especially in the Florida game, not his best showing when I watched that film. John Metchie isn't the most physical receiver when it comes to the point of attack with the ball, but does he do a good job of at least tracking down the ball and making an effort? Yes, he does. That's something he'll need to develop at the NFL game, but he does have that home run speed and ability, because once you get him out into the open field, similar to a couple other guys I'll talk about, he definitely has that home run capability, breakaway speed. Love that from him. The 2 things I don't really like about John Metchie, and I have some cons for every receiver, is his size and athleticism. I didn't truly see that physicality one-on-one, which I kind of already alluded to, especially in that Florida game. Whenever I saw corners really press up on him and get into him, when it was time for him to make a play on the ball, he didn't really show that level of physicality in which I wanted to see, because he's not the biggest receiver, 5'11", 187 pounds. Still a very good player though, and doesn't have the best release off the line of scrimmage. When you do give him separation and corners are backed off, because you're not always going to press, he's able to get into his routes a lot more crisp and to use his speed and agility, but he doesn't have the best release off the line of scrimmage when you're playing press coverage on him. Otherwise, I think that he's a phenomenal talent. I'm not sure how far he'll fall in this draft. He could potentially fall to number 65 from a lot of the rumors I've been seeing, but he did just have a meeting interview with the Jaguars. I love to see it. John Metchie is number 4 on my list for realistic receiver options for the Jaguars at number 33. Let's move on to my third receiver. Now, the third receiver I'm going to be talking about is wide receiver out of the University of Georgia, George Pickens, someone a lot of Jaguar fans are very familiar with and have been talking about consistently in these mock draft videos. George Pickens is a physical specimen, 6'3", 200 pounds. He ran a 4.47 at the 40, and he had a 33-inch vertical, and he has the traits that possess everything that you really want out of a wide receiver number one. I definitely think that's his potential in the NFL, and similar to John Mechie III in March of 2021, he had an ACL tear, so we're going to be talking about his 2020 level of production. 36 receptions, 513 yards, and 6 touchdowns as well. Let me talk about some positives that I took away when watching George Pickens. George Pickens, as I said, 6'3", 200 pounds, very good size and frame, exactly what you want to see out of a wide receiver number one. Pure strength and athleticism. He can do it all. He's great in the game where you talk about the 50-50 balls, going up there in press coverage as well. He's very, very good in the very short and intermediate routes when we're talking slants, fade routes, back shoulder passes, etc. I didn't really see too much of him in the deep ball game, but those short to intermediate routes is really where he can tear you up and just eat up that part of the middle of the field with his size and athleticism. He's very good in the run blocking game, and while a lot of people don't focus with that with wide receivers blocking is just as important as tight ends, offensive linemen, and obviously the wide receivers. If the Jaguars can have a guy lined up on the outside that can actually run block, that's going to help Travis Etienne and James Robinson a hell of a lot. Very physical at the point of attack, especially on smaller defenders. When you're 6'3", 200 pounds, and you've got the athleticism that George Pickens possesses, that's something that I love to see. George Pickens, very good job when it comes to his level of physicality and able to outbody receivers at the point of attack. 2 cons I took away from George Pickens, and one of them might be a little more critical than other, but this is just my opinion when watching him. He's more of a body receiver than a hand receiver, and what I mean by that is too many times, more often than not, I saw George Pickens using his body to bring in the ball. Ideally, I want to see you using your hands. That's the whole point of them. Granted, I get it. Some of these curl routes, these slant routes, and these intermediate routes in the middle of the field, yeah, sometimes when you're running in stride, you just catch it into your shoulder pads. I get it. But I saw that too much, and I don't really like that as much. I'd like him to use his hands a little bit more. That's just me being critical, but hopefully in the NFL game, he will learn to adjust to that because that's not always going to be the case in the NFL game. And then the second con I took away from George Pickens was his lack of eye-popping explosiveness in the open field. Like I said, I didn't really see too much of the deep ball game out of George Pickens. That's not really his bread and butter, at least what I saw at Georgia. Maybe in a different system in the NFL, he can thrive and flourish under. But he reminds me a lot, and excuse me because of my voice, he reminds me a lot of a Michael Thomas, a.k.a. Slant Boy, and I'm not even comparing him really to Michael Thomas. I'm just saying I see a lot of similar traits in him. Big, physical wide receiver who can be a number one and just dominates in the small to intermediate routes. That's something that I like to see a lot, and I think George Pickens possesses a lot of those qualities. He just doesn't have that open home run ability, which I guess if you're 6'3", 200 pounds, you don't really need. But he's got a lot of things that the Jaguars would love to have in a wide receiver. Let's go on to my second wide receiver. Now, the second wide receiver I'm going to be talking about is wide receiver out of North Dakota State University, Christian Watson. Let me say this right here, right now on the record. Christian Watson will be a top 3 wide receiver to come out of this draft. He is not being talked about enough. Sure, he's been talked about somewhat in the NFL community, especially in the Jaguars community, y'all. Wake up. Christian Watson, I almost said a different name. Christian Watson is the real deal. He's from Tampa. I believe he's born and raised, so I'm sure he'd love to come back to the state of Florida. He's a 6'4", 208-pound receiver, and in 2021, he had 43 receptions, 800 yards, 7 touchdowns, and averaged 18.6 yards per reception. Christian Watson is the real deal, Jaguar fans. And the 40-yard dash at the combine, he ran a 4.36, which is ridiculous. He had a 38.5-inch vertical. This guy is an athletic freak. I'm telling you, this guy's the real deal. Let me talk about some positives I took away when watching Christian Watson. First thing I loved watching about Christian Watson was he's great off the line of scrimmage. Very good when it comes to, beating press coverage, especially when you're 6'4". I mean, you should be able to get around some of these smaller corners who are about 5'11", 5'10", and even the safeties that are over the top. Most of these guys are not 6'4". That is a rare trait to find, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Christian Watson, love that. Explosive off the line of scrimmage. Great physical wide receiver who excels in man-to-man coverage, either over the top of the defense and winning these 50-50 balls. I mean, when you're 6'4", I expect you, when you're running a 4.36 and you have a 38.5-inch vertical, to be beating 50-50 to be winning these 50-50 matchups, and he did that consistently time and time again. Granted, is North Dakota State playing in the Big 12, in the Pac-12, in the SEC, and the ACC? No, they're not. But you know what? There's been a lot of great wide receivers, like Devontae Adams coming out of Fresno State, or Tyreek Hill, wherever the hell he came from, that have produced in the NFL. And Christian Watson is going to be one of those guys. Very great hands and is great at tracking the deep ball. Something I saw consistently out of Christian Watson time and time again was his ability to stretch the field and take it to the house. He's got long strides and he's able to beat defenders over the top. And he's 6'4". How many times do I got to say that? Like, this guy's the real deal. I'm telling you, he's the real deal. Great run after the catch in the open field, similar to what I said about the long strides. And then one con I really took away with Christian Watson, didn't really have many, was more so he's using more of his size on his route running and footwork, which I kind of don't blame him. When you're faster, bigger, and stronger than everyone you're playing against with the competition level that North Dakota State was playing at, I expect him to dominate with his physicality and his abilities. I didn't really see him dominate so much more in the short and intermediate routes, especially when working the sidelines or, back shoulder passes, just because that really wasn't his bread and butter. And, maybe that'll change in the NFL game, but I'd love to see him develop that footwork a little bit more because he was able just to really use his size and athleticism to beat guys down the field and take it to the house. Maybe that's just me being a little bit too critical, but I try to pay attention to every little detail when I watch guys about everything, and that's something I definitely took away. Now, I know I was just hyping up Christian Watson, and I would still love to have him here in Jacksonville, but I have one guy just a slightly bit ahead of him. If you haven't guessed yet, wide receiver out of Penn State University, Jahan Dotson. Jahan Dotson is a 5'11", 178-pound wide receiver. At the 40, he ran a 4.43, and he had a 36-inch vertical. Similar to John Mechie III from the wide receiver out of Alabama that I referred to earlier, Jahan Dotson had one of the most productive wide receiver seasons in 2021 in the entire nation. 91 receptions, 1,182 yards, 12 touchdowns, and he had a longest reception of 86 yards, I had a whole lot of positives that I took away from Jahan Dotson. Let's start with the first one. A very, very good and refined route runner in the short and intermediate game as well. Now, the second thing I took away from Jahan Dotson was, even though he's not the fastest wide receiver in this draft, which there's definitely a couple ahead of him, including Christian Watson and maybe even a guy like Calvin Austin, wide receiver out of Memphis, who I actually like a lot as well, he properly uses his head and his body on double moves to create separation as well, similar to what I referred to earlier about John Mechie and how they're able to do that in their route running abilities. Love that about Jahan Dotson. He's got a very good first step at defeating press coverage at the line of scrimmage, something you probably wouldn't expect out of a 5'11", 178-pound wide receiver, but he plays a lot more physical at the line of scrimmage than I think a lot of people give him credit for. Very good at finding the soft spot in defenses and creating something out of nothing. So really the improv, something I said earlier about John Mechie III as well too. If Trevor Lawrence needs to scramble out of the pocket and he's got chemistry and needs to know where his receiver is going to be and he can trust for his receiver to be in that position, Jahan Dotson, I saw that a lot out of Penn State, something I would love to see him do with Trevor Lawrence. He's a vertical threat that can take the top off of a defense and in the intermediate routes as well. Consistently, time and time again, he's very patient and knows when to accelerate, and that's the one big key factor that I love about him. Being a receiver is not about being the fastest. It's not even about sometimes being the most athletic. Sometimes it's just knowing exactly when to attack a soft spot in the zone. Look at Cooper Kupp. Not the biggest, not the strongest, not the fastest, but he's one of the smartest and most intellectual wide receivers in the game. They are patient. They know when and how to get to their spots, and they can take the top off of a defense if need be. Not so much Cooper Kupp, which we've seen him do it, but I'm just talking about Jahan Dotson. Two things I didn't love about Jahan Dotson when watching his film was he's not the best point of attack 50-50 type of wide receiver. Did he put himself in position a lot of times to go up and make a one-handed catch or to go and catch a ball in traffic? Yes, absolutely. Love that for Jahan Dotson. Did he always come down with the ball? No, he did not. But you know what? He's 5'11", 178 pounds. He's technically a little bit undersized, but he does possess a lot of traits and qualities that I kind of overlooked at as well. And the other con I have with him is his rack and his run after the catch ability. Not exactly what I want out of a 5'11" receiver. I was hoping to see a lot more breakaway speed from him in the middle of the open field, but does he do a good job of getting himself open in the first place? Absolutely. The Jags don't have any great route runners. Jahan Dotson would step in here and probably be one of the best route runners, if not the best, on the team as of right now. I love that about Jahan Dotson. He is my favorite wide receiver that is realistic for the Jaguars at pick number 33. But Jaguar fans, I want to hear your guys' thoughts down below. Let me know, do you guys want any 4 of these wide receivers I talked about at number 33? Or are you guys leaning somewhere else? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you guys enjoyed today's video, make sure you guys drop me a thumbs up. It takes 1 second and it helps me and the channel out tremendously. And also consider hitting that subscribe bell if you guys enjoyed the content for more NBA and of course Jacksonville Jaguars content, especially with 2 weeks leading up to the draft. Content's going to be great now that I actually got my voice back. And if my voice did not sound 100%, thank you for bearing with me because this is the best it has sounded to me in the last 5 days. I haven't even had a voice in the last 5 days. So thank you guys for that as well. But Brett James, aka BJ, go Jags, baby. I'm out, y'all. Peace.